China sent a record number of warplanes near Taiwan as their military exercises came to a close. Delicate diplomacy. Another diplomatic ally could switch ties to Beijing. Taiwan's prices grew at the slowest rate since October. TaiwanPlus asks why inflation is so low. Plus, a preview of Whale Island, a modern dance piece on the stage as part of the Taiwan Week Arts Festival. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. On Tuesday, a record high 91 Chinese warplanes were detected around Taiwan. 54 of those crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait. The incursion capped off large-scale military exercises by China, the country's response to President Tsai Ing-wen's recent meeting with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Bing Wang reports.
China concluded its 3 days of military exercises on Monday by sending a record 91 warplanes into areas close to Taiwan. 54 of those warplanes crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait, which runs between the two nations. The Chinese exercises involved air, land, and sea forces encircling Taiwan, simulating a blockade. China announced the drills after Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen met with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in California last week. In August last year, then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi met with President Tsai in Taipei, prompting Chinese forces to conduct large-scale exercises around the island. Beijing sees these meetings as Taiwan asserting its independence. China considers Taiwan as part of its own territory, despite the Communist Party never having ruled over Taiwan. Taiwan's foreign minister lambasted China's response to the high-level meetings.
中国在对台湾的这个威胁的情况之下，只会让两岸的距离是越来越遥远，所以中国的这些做法应该要停止了。我们对中国予以强力的谴责。
President Tsai thanked Taiwan's forces and said the country would keep monitoring the situation.
虽然中国的军演告一段落，国军和国安团队仍会持续坚守岗位，捍卫国家。
China also released a short animation simulating attacks on Taiwan on their social media. The video shows missiles fired from land, sea, and air close to Taiwan, with 2 missiles directly hitting the north and south of the island. Taiwan's officials say the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, is using these videos for cognitive warfare.
是一直不断的进行，透过他们的一些影片，对内、对外、对国际的宣传，也可以达到它的效果。这样的一种武吓，当然也会对台湾造成一股混淆视听啊。
Unlike their exercises 8 months ago, the PLA did not actually fire missiles this time. Now that the 3 days of exercises have ended, officials say they expect these incursions and cognitive warfare to continue as China has made it clear it won't stop trying means to intimidate Taiwan. Damon Lin and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
For more on China's military exercises, Bing Wang spoke to Ben Lewis, a defense analyst focusing on Taiwan's security issues.
When Pelosi visited Taiwan in August, China launched missiles around Taiwan. But this time they didn't. Why is that?
We knew Pelosi was going to visit Taiwan months in advance, so the PLA was able to craft their response portfolio in that time. The trip was delayed once, so they had even more time. The CCP is kind of walking on a bit of a tightrope right now because they had a bit of a success with their meeting with Macron. The Taiwan issue was not broached. They waited until Macron and von der Leyen left to do these exercises. So at least from my point of view, there are a number of factors, but I think it's important to recognize that I don't think they wanted to overreact too much.
Do you think these large-scale incursions will continue even after the 3-day military exercises?
There was, at least from my analysis, an operational pause towards the end of March to prepare for this. And so what we saw in August, even after the exercises ended, they kept a pretty high presence of aircraft inside the ADIZ. I don't know if it'll be, upwards of 40 or 50 like we saw today and yesterday, but the overall, I think most likely there'll be some pretty decent sized, definitely above average numbers of planes in the ADIZ, probably for the next couple of days.
And will this be a new normal in the Taiwan Strait?
In August, there was, at least from my point of view, an ulterior motive to the exercises, which was they altered the status quo in the Taiwan Strait permanently by erasing the median line functionally. Beijing never recognized it. But in August, I mean, there were a few hundred median line crossings, and there hadn't been median line crossings since late 2019 and 2020, when there were only a few dozen. And since then, median line crossings have been as common as any other kind of activity the PLA has done.
That was defense analyst Ben Lewis speaking with Bing Wang. Now that China has finished its latest military exercises near Taiwan, Eric Gao looks at how these drills were different from similar ones last August.
China's recent war games around Taiwan were the second in less than a year. The previous round last August was much larger in scope, but there were other differences as well. While a record number of Chinese aircraft flew around Taiwan this time, Beijing did not mobilize its rocket forces. China fired several missiles in last August's drills, some of which landed in Japan's exclusive economic zone. And although no missiles were fired by the Chinese side this year, it deployed other military assets. 4 carrier-based fighter planes were seen to the east of Taiwan, indicating that the Shandong aircraft carrier was operating in the area.
它今天的这一些航空母舰在我们的这个东部海域这个地方出没，是不是也代表过去我们讲的，不管是加山基地或者是制航基地，这边相对来说是我们的在开战的时候，我们从西部机场起降的飞机要转移到这些地方。那未来这边是不是有可能接战的地方也会在东部的一个空域、海空域？这个对于我们未来的作战的想定跟计划来说，可能是要去做一些调整的。
China's Shandong wasn't the only aircraft carrier in the area. The United States carrier, the USS Nimitz, was not far away in the Philippine Sea. It had just taken part in a series of exercises with Japan and South Korea.
那如果今天同时间出现的是美国的海军在西太平洋，那解放军海军也一样出现在相近的海域，那对于我们台湾来讲的话，我们是不是刚好可以去发挥一个内线作战的优势，跟我们的盟军进行一个海上的夹击？
Even as China is trying to intimidate Taiwan while it flexes its military might, it's also exposing possible vulnerabilities that Taiwan and its allies may be able to exploit. Alex Chen, Sam Hui, and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
The US and the Philippines have launched their largest joint military exercise in decades. The drills come a day after China carried out large-scale war games around Taiwan. More than 17,000 military personnel from the Philippines, the US, and Australia will participate in the drills. Around a dozen other countries will join as observers. The exercise will last until April 28th and will involve military personnel attacking a mock target warship in the South China Sea. Hundreds of people gathered in Manila to protest the drills and military agreements between the US and the Philippines. Taiwan's foreign ministry says China is trying to snatch its diplomatic allies ahead of elections. As Rick Laut reports, it's just the latest pressure point as Beijing continues its diplomatic squeeze on Taiwan.
Taiwan's Vice Foreign Minister under fire in Parliament as the country struggles to retain its remaining official diplomatic allies. Later this month, Paraguay will elect a new president. The frontrunner has said that if he wins, he will cut ties with Taipei in favour of Beijing.
中国大陆也很明显的了哈，也在拉拢各方的候选人，所以我才讲，所以这是一个事实。
China views Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory, and any official recognition of the country comes with repercussions from China. Since 2017, 8 of Taiwan's 21 long-time diplomatic allies have severed ties with Taipei for official relations with Beijing. Last month, Honduras became the latest place to flip. The break coming after Taiwan reportedly refused a request for $2.5 billion in aid.
我们不会和中国进行无意义的金钱外交竞逐。过去几年，中国不断利用各种方式打压台湾的国际参与，升高对我们的军事侵扰，冲击区域的和平稳定。
To counter that, Taiwan has been building closer ties with other democratic countries as the list of its official allies dwindles. In recent months, it has welcomed an unprecedented number of visits from political leaders of North America and Europe.
So I think we are seeing an adjustment towards more value and investment in non-diplomatic allies and partnerships. So in a way, a quality versus quantity, perhaps.
Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen has now met with 2 US House speakers, both of which reaffirmed their country's support for Taiwan. Each time, China has responded with major military drills. But China has also shown it can go on the charm offensive. Just before it launched those drills, Chinese President Xi Jinping rolled out the red carpet for his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, who has been accused of pandering to Beijing, with comments that Europe should not just follow the United States' lead on supporting Taiwan. Taiwan has had to be flexible to make any kind of headway onto the global stage, but China's persistent response has shown that it intends to prevent that from happening. Andy Shuer and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
It's day 2 of Taiwan Week, a festival of dance and theatre that attracts audiences from all over the world. Today, John van Trieste profiles one of the pieces being performed, a work called Whale Island, where Taiwan's landscape takes centre stage.
Twirling and swaying to the sounds of traditional Taiwanese music, dancers with elaborate props fill the stage. This is Whale Island, a spectacle that combines modern dance and abstract costumes with a soundtrack that has deep Taiwanese roots. The show is an allegory for the land of Taiwan, with features of its environment and landscapes depicted as characters on stage.
因为台湾岛是大陆那个板块，就是然后跟菲律宾的海洋板块挤压形成的一个岛屿。 所以讲的是一个海陆的联合。
Two genres of Taiwanese music take center stage in the play: the quiet, string-based Nanguan and the percussion-heavy Beiguan. The choice to meld these two ethnic Chinese genres was deliberate.
尤其南管的音乐是它有点妩媚感，然后它可以传递很深情的婉约的情感。 那南美馆有它的比较粗犷的风格。
Both the director and the playwright aimed for the piece to exhibit the beauty and diversity of Taiwan's land and culture.
就台湾看起来好像很小，但是事实上它很丰富。然后当然，海洋的意义就是世界上没有一个真正的孤岛，因为海洋的连接可以非常非常的强。
And during Taiwan Week, it's this richness and the importance of the link between the land and the sea that the play is showcasing to people from around the world. Ethan Pan and John van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, ancient books from 2 very different traditions are on display in Taipei. Stay tuned to find out more.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, please make sure to visit us at TaiwanPlus.com.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan's chip-making giant TSMC saw its revenue slip to a 17-month low in March. The company says it brought in close to $4.8 billion in March. That's down over 15% year-on-year and nearly 11% from February. Overall revenue for the first quarter of the year was also less than expected. The drop has been blamed on slow demand. The situation is expected to continue into the second quarter of the year. UMC, a smaller contract chip maker, also saw its Q1 revenue go down, though its March revenue was up on the month before. On Monday, shares of major US chipmaker Micron Technology jumped around 6%, following news that competitor Samsung plans to cut memory chip production. It's a positive sign for the company after a tough month. In late March, China launched an investigation into Micron on cybersecurity grounds. TaiwanPlus reporter Joyce Zheng has more on what this latest move means for Micron and the industry.
In their bid for global tech supremacy, China is taking on one of the United States' largest memory chip makers. Their target, Micron Technology. In late March, China's Cyberspace Administration said it will be investigating Micron, citing concerns about cybersecurity. Micron says it's cooperating with the review and stands by the security of its products. But it's the latest company to get caught up in the ongoing feud between the US and China. And this probe marks Beijing's first major counterstrike.
This case is significant because Micron, as a leading chip-making technology company from the United States, it also has a long-standing ties with the Chinese market. The Chinese government is sending out a message to the world that it is willing to sacrifice foreign companies to serve its national agenda.
China has been trying to build capacity to produce semiconductor chips on its own. But with the U.S. dominating the market for more advanced chips, this will be an uphill struggle. Beijing and Washington have been sparring over the issue for months. Last year, Washington cut Beijing off from certain high-end chips that use U.S. technology. Just last week, U.S. President Joe Biden doubled down on his administration's focus on domestic manufacturing.
The plan is to invest in America in a literal sense, not overseas, in America. Invest in ourselves, and it's working.
These are silicon wafers, and just one of them can be cut up to make hundreds of some of the most advanced chips, like the ones inside your iPhone. Chips or semiconductors power much of modern life, but are deeply complex to make, and they rely on integrated supply chains across countries and companies. Key choke points in that supply chain include Japan and the Netherlands. The two countries are the main producers of high-end chip-making technology. Earlier this year, Japan joined an agreement with the U.S. and the Netherlands. Under it, the three countries pledged to ban sales of semiconductor equipment to China. The move was immediately slammed by China's foreign ministry.
中方已就此在不同层级向日方严正交涉，表达强烈不满和严重关切。
The new rules will take effect in July. They are likely to severely limit Beijing's chances of catching up and could set the course of China's Micron investigation.
My prediction is that China won't take it very far because it's also damaging to China's domestic market and domestic technology developments.
Right after the Micron investigation was announced, Chinese chip stocks surged. It was a sign of optimism that Beijing's bid for self-reliance could give rise to new solutions. But with more restrictions on the way, only time will tell whether bets on China-made chips will pay off. Klein Wong and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's government says consumer prices were just over 2% higher in March than in the same month last year. That means inflation has dropped to its lowest in 4 months. And while shoppers have struggled with the cost of eggs and meat, by global standards, the price hikes here are not that high. Stash Butler takes a closer look at why Taiwan's inflation has stayed so low.
A strike in Greece, protests in Kenya, and a stampede in Pakistan. Soaring food and energy prices have made life hard for people across the world. Data shows global inflation rose to nearly 9% last year, the highest for a quarter of a century.
But here in Taiwan, prices have, for the most part, stayed low. Inflation has never broken 3.6%. The question is, why?
Well, global inflationary pressures really surged after the start of the Russia-Ukraine war in February 2022.
After Russia invaded Ukraine, global energy prices soared as the US and its allies sanctioned Russia's economy.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy.
But in Taiwan, the shock was barely felt. The country does import nearly all its fossil fuel, but it didn't buy much from Russia. It's also been developing clean energy. More crucially, Taiwan's government froze electricity prices. In essence, it paid for the price rises itself.
Gasoline prices are very low in Taiwan. Electricity is very cheap. So the government is putting up with the extra cost of high energy prices.
The rate of inflation also depends a lot on how it's calculated.
the relative weight that has been assigned to the different items inside the CPI baskets has played a role.
Economists decide on an inflation figure by looking at the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. That's one number that captures how prices have changed over a year for things like food, housing, and transport. Different governments give those things different weights, depending on how much they think people spend on them.
So some of the differences between Taiwan's headline inflation rate and the US's, for example, are down to what products and services they focused on. And Taiwan's lower inflation might be more of a question of stats than reality. But there's a third factor.
I think what's important is that the starting point for inflation in Taiwan before the Russia-Ukraine war began was very low.
Taiwan's inflation rate has been well below the world average for decades, and mostly below other advanced economies too. Booming manufacturing in Asia as a whole has kept prices here low. But Taiwan's low inflation could also be a sign of deeper problems with the economy.
I wouldn't say this is a success, to be frank. Now it looks good, but one has to understand that the reasons why inflation is not there might eventually not be such good reasons.
Taiwan has low wages for a rich country. The minimum salary here is $870 a month. So instead of spending their money and boosting the economy, people save.
It is hard to think of any inflationary pressure if people need to save what they earn in, like extra out of a good year.
Taiwan has dodged most of the world's steepest price rises by keeping a lid on energy costs. That saved consumers countless sums of money. But the same factors that keep inflation low, cheap electricity, low wages, an aging society, and weak demand, could spell trouble ahead. Damon Lin and Stash Butler in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A new exhibit of rare historic books has opened in Taipei. The books come from two collections, one European and one Asian. Together, they show how books from two different cultures evolved side by side over time. John Van Trieste takes us to the museum for a closer look.
Here at Taipei's National Palace Museum, works from two of history's great libraries are coming face to face. Over a dozen works from the Vatican Library join books from the former library of China's emperors. The Vatican works include works of literature, history, science, mathematics, geography, philosophy, and more, some in ancient manuscript form. And the Palace Museum's own Chinese works are treasures too. They were brought over to Taiwan during the communist takeover of China. One of the curators who has made this exhibit possible is Liu Shixun. She says the exhibit shows off what sets these two traditions of books and reading apart.
纸张上就是有很大的差异。梵蒂冈宗座图书馆里面就藏有非常多用动物皮质或是羊皮纸所制作成的手抄本。那一直要到这个印刷术的普及之后，然后才变成是纸。那相较之下，在明清宫廷的话，一直都是以纸为主。
And what these traditions have in common.
那如果我们从西方来看的话，就是从15世纪，就是古腾堡它的这个活字印刷术的发明之后，印出来的那个书的量也变得很大。那在中国其实也是受这个印刷术的影响也很大。那譬如说像从宋代就是毕生发明那个活字印刷术之后，那这个活字印刷术就一直被使用。
For the most part, the books include titles popular in their time and place. The Vatican collection includes richly decorated Bibles and prayer books, and printed editions of ancient Latin and Greek works. In turn, the Chinese imperial libraries have books on the Confucian classics and Buddhism. Those are alongside great dictionaries and encyclopedias commissioned by the emperors themselves. The exhibit also notes that Europe and China did not exist in intellectual bubbles.
主要就是耶稣会士，就是扮演一个很重要的角色。因为在明清时代来到中国的耶稣会士，他们是借西学来传教。然后有个耶稣会士叫卜尼格，然后他就是把这个明代李时珍的《本草纲目》，然后翻译成拉丁文本。
The curators here say books like these make it clear that scholars in Europe and China tried to understand each other. They say there was a lively exchange between the two sides. From now into July, books from these two cultures are on display side by side, inviting comparisons and an appreciation for two rich traditions of books. Rick Yi and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Team Taiwan has bagged 24 gold medals at the World Sports Stacking Championships 2023 in Singapore. Our reporter Sandy Chi has the story.
In a flash, cups are stacked into 3 pyramids of different sizes. This is the World Sports Stacking Championships 2023. It was held in Singapore after a 3-year hiatus due to the pandemic. Team Taiwan excelled at the event, taking home 24 golds, as well as 28 silver and 20 bronze medals. The team of 30 competed with 370 stackers from 17 countries. 11-year-old Liu Cailing made her mark, finishing 3 individual competitions in under 10 seconds. She was named the tournament's fastest female contestant.
4斤，然后感觉很开心。
平常一天要练习多久？
一天1-2个小时，我觉得很好玩。
The event was also the first time for 6 Taiwanese contestants with special needs to perform on the international stage.
我们希望能够未来在各县市的地方政府能够受到重视，给予孩子能够更多的机会接触蝶杯，让我们在这项运动的选手的素质跟实力能够更加提升，也得到更多的帮助、更多的补助。
Team Taiwan is now back home and already preparing for the next year's championships, to be held in the U.S. state of Florida. Isan Pan and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we leave you with drone footage of the snow-covered mountains of France's 3 valleys, a popular skiing spot in the Alps. I'm Yin Khvat. Take care and see you next time.